It is Friday, April 21st. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back to another zany episode of LTPS. We have more PS Plus news to go over. We had a ton last week, and now we've got a little bit more this week. So, as always, we'll start with the reminders. So if you haven't just yet, make sure you claim the PS Plus April Essential Games, also PS Plus Extra and Premium. That lineup is now live on PSN as well, so you can go check those out. But we have another trophy patch for a classic game. This time it's Loco Roco Midnight Carnival. I almost want to say Midnight Club Dub Edition. Not quite that. But we got another trophy patch. I'm loving it. So I'll tell you, it's great. They're actually going back and doing like all of them, basically. It kind of makes you wonder why they didn't have this stuff ready on day one. Also more classic games in general, but whatever, we're getting there slowly but surely. So there's that. And then also we have another new game announced for PS Plus Extra next month, which is a day one launching in a PS Plus Extra title. It's Humanity. So that game had that game had a demo recently on PSN from that State of Play we had not that long ago. And it seems like it's a really fun game. And so that one is going to launch into PlayStation Plus day and date on May 16th. And that's also a title where it's PS4, PS5, PSVR, and PSVR 2. Not many examples of games that are on all of those platforms, but that one as a brand new title launching into PlayStation Plus Extra on May 16th. We still don't have the full May lineup, obviously, but we do know that title is going to be a part of it. So kind of a very irregular, but getting more regular basis of day one titles launching into PS Plus. Also nice to see. Now, getting into our first news story, we have a new PS5 system software update. This one was 23.01, 07.20.00, and this one has three main changes. So not only did they improve the system performance and stability overall, but they've also improved the messages and usability on some screens. Not all of them, just some. And then they've also updated the DualSense Edge wireless controller device software to improve stability. So you've got improved stability for your controller, the console, and some screens. Kind of another throwaway firmware, but hey, it's a firmware update that you have to do at some point nonetheless. Now moving on to Horizon Forbidden West: The Burning Shores DLC, which finally came out, and no spoilers of course, but we'll touch on a few things. So the first one being the reviews have so far been generally positive. It seems like the overall consensus has been that this content is not only good for what it is, but it paints a bright picture for where the franchise is going to go, eventually getting into that third game. So not only with the gameplay mechanics, but also with story where, not much of a spoiler, but of course they have to rethink that going into the third game with the passing of Lance Reddick. But yeah, it does seem like it bodes well for the future of the franchise if you're into it. And also we had a patch for this game, for the base game, to not only support this content, but this recent patch also has new accessibility options for those with the game in general. You don't need the Burning Shores to access this, so there's two pretty interesting settings in there. The first one being called Thalassophobia. That's for those that have a fear of like large bodies of deep dark water. And so if you turn that mode on, basically the water visibility is improved, and it also lets you breathe indefinitely underwater regardless of how far along you are in the story. So that's really cool. And then also there's a mode in there for basically auto pickup. Like you can auto pick up berries and machine scraps and things like that. Although I think it doesn't work if you have full berries on you or something. It's kind of weird. I didn't test it out entirely, but still, that's nice to have, of course. But with the thalassophobia thing, like there's fears for everything, but it's interesting how like even something like that, there's the foresight to go, oh, well, this can be applied to video games as well, and how can we make this better? And so whether you genuinely have that fear, and that's great to have in the game to now you can toggle that on, or you don't. I mean, the accessibility modifiers in these games have been so unique, and really they go a long way. Again, you don't even necessarily need an ailment to turn these on. It's just something where they can become extremely convenient, and it's like the one modifier that you would need for that particular thing that bothers you about the game, and you can leave everything else off, right? So it's really cool that there's just so much more being added over time for some of these games. Next up, for Final Fantasy XVI, there was a pre-launch live stream and event announced in Los Angeles on June 11th at 3 p.m. PDT. And this is something where I suspect if it's not this event, then it would be either, well, this or the PlayStation Showcase, where they will eventually release that planned demo. We know that there's going to be a playable demo that will come out before the game officially launches. And so at least in terms of where that demo is going to shadow drop, because I fully expect that's how they're going to do it. Probably either the PlayStation Showcase around late May, early June, really depends on once they confirm that, we know where it is. It has to exist first, obviously, but if it's not that, then it would not surprise me if that's where they shadow drop the demo with this, June 11th pre-launch event. So just keep your eyes peeled for that if you want to play this game before it eventually launches. Now, moving on to one of our bigger news stories from this past week. It actually happened just yesterday, which is Sony released a brand new Welcome to the Family image, which normally when they do that, it's because they've acquired a new studio. PlayStation has officially acquired Firewalk Studios. So basically, if you remember back in 2021, that was when Sony initially made this publishing agreement with Probably Monsters and Firewalk Studios for a new AAA multiplayer game. And at the time, at least, Firewalk was founded in 2018, but during that initial announcement of that publishing agreement, the head of PS Studios, Herman Hulst, had mentioned on Twitter that he was already playing the game that they were working on, and he's really enjoyed the progress so far. Now, it seems like the progress since then has been much better, because that led to Sony working out some kind of agreement with Probably Monsters and has now acquired Firewalk Studios. So Tony Hsu and Ryan Ellis, the studio head and game director at Firewalk, had this to say, and I quote, "Today we're taking the next natural step in joining PlayStation Studios. We've worked closely with Herman and the very talented team at PlayStation for years, helping to make our new game even better. To join PlayStation Studios is to formally become part of a family that has produced many of the most storied games of our age, and we are honored. We want to thank everyone who supported us along the way and those looking forward to our future. It's been an incredible journey so far, and we can't wait for the next chapter in this adventure." Just for more background, Firewalk has about 150 employees right now, comprised of former Respawn, Bungie, and Raven Software developers, and also the press release notes that they'll be working with Bungie and Haven for the upcoming SIE live service push that we know we're expecting. So, Firewalk Studios, huh? Can't really say I'm too surprised, given that this is fitting the criteria of Sony's relatively new way of approaching merger and acquisition, because as we've said so many times before, they're in this post-long-standing partner era where that's how they used to do it, but all those developers are gone, as in they bought them all, Housemarque and Bluepoint being the last ones, and so recently, there's a few core tenets of how they've been identifying acquisition targets. I think, we can sort of list them off as multiplayer, live service, talent-driven, because they're still not necessarily targeting IP, right? That's not how Sony has ever done it. They still have not done it that way, although there are certainly external factors at play, a la Microsoft, where they may certainly have their hand forced to start playing that game, but that's besides the point. For now, they have not done that just yet, so they're still primarily driven by the talent at the studio and also the affordability, because when it's a brand new studio, granted, you're going to be investing a lot in that studio to help it grow over time, but it's still something where your initial going in cost is going to be quite low. These are studios that have, either hardly any product shipped like Firesprite or no product shipped like Haven. But, when you look at things like Firesprite or Haven, like Haven, for example, is also a live service studio that they were interested in because they're also building cloud-based developer tools. Mark Cerny's heavily involved in that process as well. So they like the progress that's being made, and that must be true for what Firewalk is doing thus far. And so that's why this isn't really all that surprising. Now, it still makes me think that Deviation may eventually become the next acquisition target. I think that was one of my predictions for this year. So fingers crossed that it turns out to be true, just so I can be right. But otherwise, Deviation would make sense. We had the Ballistic Moon rumor recently. They're a new studio. We know they're making a PS5 PC game called Project Bates. So if that was announced, next week, it wouldn't surprise me, because that's just how Sony's been doing it thus far. But, it is something where there's not really anything to be too excited about in the here and now. You know, you hear another acquisition like this, it's like, okay, well, whatever, because all we know is that it's a multiplayer live service game. If you don't like live service stuff or multiplayer, you're already signing out of this. And I'm kind of there with you, although I'm always of the mind, let me see the project first. This one is, we assume, very far along, as in we might be seeing it soonish, maybe sometime this year. So at least we can now say that Firewalk has the investment and support of PlayStation Studios backing it for this game that they're going to release, and working in collaboration with Bungie and Haven, so maybe that bodes well for what this project is eventually going to be. Moving on to our next story, we have more PlayStation 5 sales milestones, and it's kind of what we always talk about. It's good news. Well, for Sony, it's good news. I guess it doesn't necessarily matter too much in the grand scheme of things for you, the consumer, but Sony's selling a lot of PS5. So with the recent release of the March 2023 Circana numbers, which tracks the video game market here in the US, PS5 has officially caught up to and exceeded PS4 sales when launch aligned. So after 29 months on the market, PS5 has finally exceeded what PS4 did in that time. And we also found out that PS5 set another sales record for March. Up until now, PSP held the record for most units sold in March in PlayStation history, with 620,000 units during its launch. PS5 has exceeded that. Now, we also have new data coming in from Europe, where for the first 3 months of this year, PS5 saw a sales increase of 369% year over year. A similar story where when we talked about that for the UK, but that's a percentage-based jump, just that for the UK and Europe, there were very severe stock shortages for PS5, but still, it's something where PS5 continues to be the primary growth driver in these markets for the overall games business. Console hardware was up 67% in Europe for the month of March, driven primarily by PS5 at a time where we're seeing Switch and Xbox see year-over-year declines. Another interesting thing to mention, Matt Piscatella points out that the market is stabilizing and engagement levels are trending back to pre-pandemic levels, and also subscription spending growth is slowing down as well, which does not surprise me given that the way Sony has approached this was basically just trying to extract more money out of the same users, because they know that they're not going to sustain the amount of PS Plus subscribers they had at their peak during the pandemic. And Microsoft in the same way, where they were more open about this, about saying they're getting highly saturated on console, growing rapidly on PC, but at a certain point they're going to saturate there as well. The problem with subscription, and I think that Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick put this in the best way possible, which is that it's just the consumer habits are much different in video games, right? When you're looking at TV, film, music, where you can consume hundreds of hours of content, and you're kind of cycling through a lot of music, a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows. You can get a lot done versus, you know, being able to finish two, three games at a time, sometimes less depending on, you know, your own situation. Some games are very long, and so when you have a catalog of 400 to 600, sometimes 800 titles like PS Plus Premium, it begs the question, you know, how much value are you really getting out of it if you can't, you know, play all those titles, right? But obviously there's certain ways you can use subscription to your benefit. But yeah, we are still seeing some incredible numbers from Sony. At this point, it's really a matter of waiting for their financial report, where we can find out if they're going to exceed or reach their 6.2 million figure that they wanted to get to, which will make their overall forecast for the fiscal year come true, which they had increased it near the end there. Now, because PS5 console supply has been so good, we had this pretty funny viral post on the PlayStation subreddit where it shows somebody screen capped a Facebook Marketplace seller trying to sell their extra PS5s below MSRP because they had too many of them, and so obviously this was a PlayStation 5 scalper that now has to get rid of all these consoles that are taking up space, and the viral post says, "Don't even feel a little bit bad for them," with a lot of upvotes and comments saying, "Yeah, screw this guy," you know, this, that, and the other. You can see in those pictures, it looks like those are digital edition Ragnarok bundles, which means they've been doing this the entire way through. They never let up. And yeah, I can't feel bad for them either. It still baffles me that anybody would even, I mean, I get it. Like, you buy something, you sell it for a high price, but not only is it, morally, it just makes you lame, to put it lightly. Could probably say much more unsavory things about scalpers. But it just, for the amount of capital it takes, like, what are you doing with your money, man? Like, we're talking about multiple PS5s, $400 to $500 a pop. You know how much money you have to spend, and then and then the PS5's a big console. The boxes are huge, right? So to store them in your home and then selling them locally, which I would not feel comfortable doing that, especially knowing that scalpers are not, seen as angels. I can't quite fathom why people do it. It's just so, again, lame. We'll just put it lightly, but it's nice to see that the scalping issue is more or less eradicated finally. Now, it's not all good news in the world of PlayStation, because Sony has done a very Sony move, which is they've increased the prices of their games on PC recently in 7 countries, which doesn't matter what game it is. It seems like all of them got a price readjustment. So, Days Gone, Returnal, Sackboy, God of War, whatever it is, you name it. But it seems like Argentina got hit pretty hard. There's also Canada, Chile, Colombia, China, they all went up, and it sucks. Ideally, it would be great if prices would go down, especially because, Sony is a publisher and platform holder. Initially when they launched PS5, they did raise prices on their games. And a few other publishers did as well at the same time, but when you have a few set that example, then more follow suit. And for the PC market, where there's an expectation of the games being either cheaper, or at the very least they go on sale more frequently, Sony stepping in doesn't bode well for like other publishers, seeing how they do and then realizing that maybe they can get away with higher prices in that segment. Hopefully that's not the case, although then again, prices have pretty much gone up on all sorts of goods, so I'm not sure there's really any good way to fight it outside of just everybody agreeing to not buy this stuff anymore, but that might not be the case. Now, we've got a bit of a weird situation going on for Spider-Man 2, where the voice actor Yuri Lowenthal, who does, Peter Parker in the game, he was doing a Reddit AMA for Skybound, and that's where he confirmed, when asked, that he's completely done with the voice acting and mocap on Spider-Man 2, which, good news. But then a few hours later on Twitter, when somebody asked the same thing, he said no, and that there's a lot more to do on the game. So, direct contradiction, no clue what's going on there. We did have Tony Todd make a slip-up where he kind of inferred very openly that the game is planned for September with an August push. We only know officially that it's fall, but it seems like September is where we should be expecting it. And at least having like a little minor update with Yuri Lowenthal would have been nice, but that's also something where he's not at liberty to say that, so maybe that's why he gave the update of no, there's a lot more to do, but whatever. We'll have to wait and see, because likely we're probably going to find out more about Spider-Man 2 fairly soon anyway. Now, we've got another update here for Media Molecule, where recently confirmed on Twitter by him and also the official Twitter account, but one of the co-founders, Mark Healy, is leaving Media Molecule after 17 years with the team. He says, and I quote here, "So, after 17 incredible years of co-birthing and building Media Molecule, I've decided it's time for me to fly the nest, set sail, and chart a new course. Today is my last day at Media Molecule." Of course, previous co-founders, Alex and Kareem, also left in 2020 and 2022, respectively. Now, there's actually not, I wouldn't say this is bad news, just because we don't, sometimes it can be bad news if you have founders leaving, and sometimes it just aligns perfectly with basically what is happening with Media Molecule. They recently confirmed they're moving on from Dream, so September is where they're done with live service updates and content, and having a roadmap for that game. They're pretty much moving on to something else, and it's not uncommon at all that you would have a major shift for a game studio or anybody in their career, and right before a new product launch or something, they decide it's time to, move on to something else. So, not saying it's bad news, might just be standard affair stuff, because these guys all did do 15-something years, going back to Alex and now Mark with 17 years. So For the most part, it seems like Media Molecule is still going to be moving on to something entirely new. Still a lot of folks at Media Molecule that are, very talented at what they do. So I'm still, as much as I hate to say it, because Dream still was a fantastic product, but I am looking forward to them moving on to something else. Now, moving on to our latest update for not the Microsoft ABK deal, but instead Sony now being placed under the microscope for their business practices being examined by American politicians. So interesting how the tables have been picked up as they were and perhaps rotated by some sort of amount, maybe 180 degrees, maybe only 127. We don't really know for sure, but what we do know is that this happened recently. So the North Dakota Republican Senator Kevin Cramer sent a letter to Sony's CEO Kenichiro Yoshida expressing concern about Sony's console business and the strategies that they use to protect themselves from competition. Senator Cramer wants unredacted copies of Sony's agreements with publishers for exclusive games, and also the ones that would bar publishers from releasing games on rival subscription services. Now, it's worth noting that Microsoft is also a donor to Senator Cramer's campaign, and we're also seeing more scrutiny thrown at Lina Khan, the FTC chairwoman, where during hearings, other senators are asking her why she's siding with Sony, the market leader in that segment, when it comes to the ongoing proceedings of the Microsoft ABK deal, the administrative process. So I don't want to say it's obvious, but it wouldn't really be surprising if Microsoft is the reason why this is happening all of a sudden, or Sony has always had this lead, but granted, before it wasn't something where antitrust was a huge issue, or rather one that was heavily scrutinized, and that's actually why we are where we are today. Point being, this seems like it could very well be an easy way for Microsoft to just throw some pressure on Sony, because they are probably aware of how this may not actually go anywhere, especially given how the senator is bringing up two very common practices that, all platform holders for as long as this business has been around have done, right? It's just very commonplace. So, what are you going to do? Step in and say Sony can't do these things, but Microsoft and Nintendo can? Because that's what happens, right? Exclusive agreements are extremely common. It's that stuff which we can't equate to massive acquisitions, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. I think it's really just a lot of noise to, give Sony a little bit of, stress, anxiety, use of resources to try and play these things down, as it were. But I guess we'll keep watching how this unfolds, because now we're seeing some stuff happen to Sony, which maybe was an eventuality, if we're being honest. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was appraising my game collection to see the total value. I've been meaning for a long time to catalog my collection, alphabetize it, and just for curiosity's sake also find out the total value. So if you haven't seen that yet, you can finally get a better look at my collection in detail, and then as always another upload on Tuesday. But until then, that is it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.